So we are live. Welcome to another episode of the Greatness Engineering Hour show, a show where I bring you champions, people with incredible stories of triumph, and people who are here to inspire you. Because what I really want you is to understand that you're not alone. There are people who have, gone through hurdles, challenges that didn't actually deter them to keep going forward and become the best version of themselves. So today, my guest is Warwick Fairfax. He has an incredible story of triumph, and I think and I know that you're gonna like the story because it's pretty incredible to be able to accomplish what is has accomplished after such a big loss in especially in when you're talking about something that was built from generation after generation. So what is this story? I'm not gonna tell you now. I'm gonna bring in to tell the story himself. What I really want to let you know is that it's the founder of Crucible Leadership, and it's a physiological and practical breakthrough in turning business and personal failures into the fuel for igniting a life of significance. So he has been, held by Forbes and Fairfax. The name Fairfax is very well known here in Australia, so very big name in the media. And I again gonna leave Warwick to tell you all the story and tell you exactly how he's been able to go from leading this business that was built by his great grandfather to multi-billion dollars, and how as a young graduate coming from out of Harvard, he basically didn't get it right. But at the end of the day, he learned from this big failure, and let's listen from let's hear from him to know exactly what happened and where he is right now. So don't go anywhere. As usual, please make sure you have a pen and the paper, because there's going to be a lot of learning today again, and I don't want you to leave it just here. You have to write it down. You have to share this knowledge, because this platform is really for you to learn, for you to get the right knowledge, to get the inspiration, but at the end of the day, to apply what you've learned. So let's start a conversation with Warwick, and stay tuned. I'm bringing him in.
Is it all right? Okay. Let's get started right into it. And that is the power of labels, right?
On memories, but as I got older, I started to be more aware of some of the abusive sides of.
So welcome, Warwick. Welcome to the Greatness Engineering Hour show. It's such a pleasure to have you and to be able to spend an hour engineering greatness, like I say. and help our viewer to really, learn from you and get to, leave this platform with something very valuable that they can, apply while, when they leave. So just, before we go, far into, the conversation, just wanted to ask you to let us know who you are, who is Warwick, and what's your story?
Well, Muriel, thank you so much for having me. I love the whole concept of engineering greatness, and I'm sure we'll talk about what does greatness mean, and it'll be a
Exactly.
wonderful conversation. So, yeah, I grew up in Sydney in Australia, I guess the other side of the country from where you are in Perth. Uh, I live
Exactly.
in near Washington, D.C. and Maryland at the moment, but as some in Australia might know or remember, I grew up in a large family media business, Fairfax Media. At its height, it had Sydney Morning Herald, The Age in Melbourne, Financial Review, the major opinion leaders in the country. It had TV stations, radio stations, magazines. So it was a very large company. It was founded 150 years before by my great-great-grandfather in like 1841. So it was, I grew up in a family that not only was wealthy, but it was sort of almost the height of, I don't know if the word is status, respect, old money. It's, there was this ethos of serving the community, trying to have, fair, reputable papers. So, yeah, it was really felt there was a sense of duty growing up in that family. I was from my dad's third marriage, and so I had there were people in the business for generations, and so the expectations from my parents was that I would one day go into the family business and take a leading position.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, there was never any question, well, that's what I should do. How could you not feel obligated to go into a business? It's not just about money, but it was a sense of serving the community in a significant way. It just felt like, well, that's not, it would be to sort of abdicate your duty. So I always worked hard, and which almost kind of made it worse. When you work hard and get good grades at school, it's like, aha, maybe you really could be somebody that could serve, in this company. So I did my undergrad at Oxford University in England, like my dad and some others. Worked on Wall Street, went to Harvard Business School. And so early in 87, I came back. My dad, who was in his late 80s when he died, that created some turmoil within the family. Stock market price started rocketing up. So the market felt the company was in play, so to speak. So at the time, I felt like the company wasn't being as well managed as it could be and wasn't being run along the ideals of the founder. And that may or may not be true, but it was my perspective at the time. So armed with a Harvard MBA and a lot of naivety, youth, and folly, I launched this $2.25 billion takeover of the company. And in the short term, it succeeded in the sense I got control, but the family members sold out the October 87 stock market crash, had our asset sales. So by the end of 87, it had an unsustainable level of debt. And yes, I brought in new management that increased operating profits by 80%, but after interest, it was there's nothing they could really do. So in 1990, Australia got in a significant recession. Media companies were the main source of revenue. Newspapers are very cyclical. And so when you've got zero room for error and it's a big recession, you're in trouble. So we had to file for bankruptcy in late 1990. So what I was trying to do is to make the company safe from takeover and ensure it was well run along with the ideas of the founder. The cure was definitely worse than the disease. So rather than stabilize things, I actually made it worse. So it was really a disaster. As you know, the company does live on. The major newspapers are still there, but it's caused a lot of friction within the family. It certainly affected financially. I guess it affected me, although money isn't really something as a huge driver for me. But feeling like I let down my parents and family and caused friction, and I'm a person where faith is very important. So feeling like somehow I let God down in some sense, it's a whole nother strange paradigm. But
Mm-hmm.
I just felt like I'd made so many huge mistakes. And so it was pretty traumatic, that whole episode. Yeah, it was failure on an epic scale, front page of the newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm. And I can imagine, because already when it's a normal family, to deal with it is difficult, but being in a front page, that's
Mm.
even worse. It's like giving you another the fatal the fatal thing for you to just get knocked out. So how did you, because that's quite a big deal, I mean, with all this turmoil,
Mm.
family and financial and professional, how did you manage that? How did you get back and stay, still, and get this determination to still, going, for something? And what is this something now?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, first, just to sort of set the scene for the audience, for most of the 90s, it was grim, because not only it was in the papers. I mean, there were editorial cartoons, which is never good if somebody does an
Mm-hmm.
editorial cartoon of you in the paper. There was one like, "How do you start a small business?" Give Warwick Fairfax a big one. I mean, it was some
Oh,
devastating cartoons. And
oh my
really, it was the
God.
sense that the
Mm-hmm.
founder was a person of faith. In my stupid naivety and poor theology, I felt like it must be God's plan to resurrect the company, at least in terms of his values, which, obviously, if God wanted it to happen, it would have. So poor theology. But so it was really the sense of letting down family and so many people. So, there were a number of factors that brought me out of that difficult circumstance. And just one other factor to just help the audience understand. Most people grow up thinking, well, what do I want to do in life? What am I good at? What are my talents? What do I feel called to do? That was an irrelevant question, because it was all about being in the family business. So here I am in my
Mm-hmm.
early 30s, in the 90s, thinking, well, now what do I want to do? I'd never thought about that ever, because
Mm-hmm.
it was an irrelevant question. It's all about duty.
Mm-hmm.
So a number of factors brought me back. I mean, one was actually my faith perspective, and obviously audience will have different faith perspectives, and I think everybody needs to find their own path. But for me, I felt like God loves us unconditionally. He doesn't need what we do per se. It's more about faith. And so that sense of unconditional love,
Mm-hmm.
the world, the universe, however you look at it, I think it's when we put our self-esteem wrapped up in what we achieve, that's a recipe for failure, because
Mm-hmm.
rarely will we achieve everything that we want to. And if you don't, then it's like, oh, I failed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a silly psychological paradigm. So that was one. I have a very supportive wife. I've been blessed. We've been married over 30 years, and that sort of unconditional love from people here. Had a young family. So those were factors. And little by little, I found things I could do without messing up. So, I'd worked on Wall Street, so I, understand how to do business and financial analysis, or at least did back then anyway. And so I did some financial and business analysis for an aviation services firm. From there, I sort of felt like that I always loved asking questions. I heard about executive coaching, became a certified executive coach. So this is something I can do. I began to find my voice. I began to figure out, well, who is Warwick Fairfax? I began to learn. It's a sort of a voyage of inner discovery, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I was on 2 nonprofit boards, my kids' school board and church board. And I began to see being on a board where I'm able to speak truth in a way that's heard, in a
Mm-hmm.
respectful way, in a way that collaborates, that doesn't have to be right, but is not afraid of saying.
Mm-hmm.
Because often board members are afraid of speaking up for fear of
Exactly.
offending. When
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's not me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then from there, eventually into writing a book about my story, which should come out next year, and then Crucible Leadership. It was really a journey, and probably I'd say a key point in the journey was, to use a phrase I'm sure your listeners have heard, to use my pain for a purpose. And so probably one of the key milestones in my comeback, if you will, at least from a self-worth in a sense, was probably about 12 years ago in 2008 in a church we go to in Maryland in the US. The pastor asked me to give a 7-minute illustration of some sermon he was giving. So I told about my story, and since it's a church, what I feel like the lessons I'd learned from a spiritual perspective. And somehow people could relate to that story, even though there weren't any other former media moguls in the congregation that I know. And most people in America have not heard of Fairfax Media. They just think of Australia as, koalas, kangaroos, opera house. I mean, that's really all they think of, which is fine. So I thought, gosh, if my story can somehow help people by being vulnerable about my failures, my mistakes. And so that really was another turning point. And so now in Crucible Leadership, whether it's blogs, social media, or podcasts we have telling other people's stories of setbacks and failure, it really provides a forum where I feel like I'm being who I am. I'm a reflective advisor. I'm not a take charge CEO. So now I'm really operating in the center of my gifting for a purpose, in this case, helping others come back through their own crucible experiences. So that it gives my life purpose, again, pain for a purpose. So now I'm in a much better place, but it took years. Certainly the 90s were not easy.
But I think sometimes, and it's good, and like you said, to use our pen for a purpose and tell our story, because there's so many people who can relate, but sometimes we think we are alone until we start to share it, and then we just realize, wow, I mean, I'm not alone, and it gives us, strength and courage to keep, sharing it, and understand that we're not perfect. Nobody is perfect, and we should just embrace who we are and share, if we can help somebody else, because sometimes we just so conditioned. And in your case, it was very strong because there was a history already. Your great grandfather created this, so it was running in the family. So like you said, you didn't have to ask yourself what you really wanted to do, and then you realize you were living somebody else's life, and
Exactly.
and you had to go through this great failure to understand that's not actually my purpose. It's somebody else, purpose, but now I'm going to find my purpose. So that's very powerful, very, very powerful.
It is. And I think what you just said is so important for folks to understand is a lot of times we grow up and it's wonderful to respect your parents and elders and family, but you have to be who you are. I mean, it used to be when I was growing up, well, you could be a lawyer, stockbroker, maybe a doctor, and pick one of those professions. Well, that's fine. They're noble professions, but maybe you want to be a painter or a musician or play in sports or maybe an entrepreneur, or there's all sorts of things. So certainly one of the lessons I think I've learned is be who you are, be who you're designed to be. We're all designed a certain ways, whether it's you might be good at maths or science, or maybe at languages, you may be artistic, athletic. Be who you are. Find a way that it's in line with how you designed it, and do something that you're passionate about. So it's fine to honor your parents. Respect is a big thing, but you got to be who you are, and that's really. I know it sounds so simple, but there's so many people that. It's funny. I heard somebody once tell me about a quote from an American poet, Thoreau, who talked about people leading lives of quiet desperation. I think when you're leading lives, when you're not who you are, it can be decades of leading a life of a quiet desperation. You're miserable because you're being who you don't want to be, who you're not. That makes no sense, but so many people do that.
And sometimes, like you said, it's good to go back to your faith and to go back to
Mhm,
God for those who believe in God or
mhm,
any other faith, because it actually put things in perspective, and you just realize, you don't have to, like you said, you have to respect your elders, but
mhm.
you don't have to do what they have to do, because that's not your gift. That's really not what you were sent for, and God helps in those
And
situations. And your help
absolutely.
came through this, through this loss that you had, so that
And
you could go back.
absolutely. And the spiritual is interesting. I think most people today, certainly in America, will say, well, I don't know that I'm into religion or church, but they'll say I'm spiritual. The
Hmm.
vast majority of people think of spirituality in the broad sense. So from my perspective, you've got to get in touch with your fundamental beliefs and values. Most people
Hmm.
have them. I know as a coach, I would sometimes ask people, so tell me about your values and beliefs, and they tell me. So tell me, to what degree do you think you're living them? Well, I'm not really living them. And then as a
Hmm.
coach, because we're not judgmental, so do you think you need to change your values and beliefs or bring your current life in harmony with your values and beliefs? Well, most sane people will say, yeah, I don't want to change my values and beliefs. I need to live them. And it
Hmm.
would be pretty strange if they said, nope, I need to change my values and beliefs to conform with how I'm living today. Some would
Hmm.
say that, but very,
Hmm.
very few. And
Hmm.
so, honor what you believe. And I don't care what that is, but whether it's a faith tradition or a set of values from family, whatever it is, live in light of that. And so,
Hmm.
I think that really changes things. So for me, when it's, my faith teaches me about humility and integrity, and it's not about what you do. I mean, every person has value. You don't have to be CEO to be
Hmm.
have a sense of self-worth. Just we are intrinsically worthy of. We intrinsically have worth, and so that changes your perspective. So you
Hmm.
might say, well, my dad wanted me to, go into the family business or be a lawyer, and I just want to paint. Well, you're
Hmm.
probably not going to earn a whole lot of money being a painter, but if that's what you love,
Hmm.
that's your choice. It's your life. Honor that. Paint.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, don't be afraid of doing what you love. Just be true to who yourself and your values, and that's really the foundation, I think, of living a joyful life. Of
Hmm.
live a life that's true to who you are and true to what you believe. Again,
Hmm.
that sounds simple, but so many people, they don't live a life in line with what they believe.
Hmm. And that's a big, that's a big issue, a key issue right now, especially with this competitive environment that we
Mhm.
have, where they really push you to go to a certain area, and live your life, or especially your professional life,
Mhm.
a certain way, and because you have all those categories, and people are fearful. They don't want to be left out. So what they do, they just suffer in silence, and never basically honor what they believe in, because they want to fit into this competitive world, and be recognized in a way, because and I think that's sometimes the problem, is that we tend to look more outside than inside, and we get lost in the process. So
And
that's a
it,
key.
I mean, you raise an interesting point. In this competitive world, we tend to, if you're in a company, for instance, you tend to want to fit a certain mold. Like, oh, to be
Hmm.
successful, I have to be tough and make difficult decisions and be able to fire people and just be this ultra A-type personality. And you feel like, oh, well, that's what successful executives are
Hmm.
like. And ironically, that's not necessarily the case. I remember a book, one of the most widely read books in the corporate world, Good to Great by Jim Collins. And he studied organizations that had been successful in the stock market over, I don't know, 15 years or so. And he found they were led by CEOs that you would never read about on the front cover of Business Week. They're leading significant organizations, but they're not very prominent. They
Hmm.
were driven, but they were very humble. When
Hmm.
they were asked, why are you successful? Oh, well, I don't really do anything. It's just my team. Well,
Hmm.
how many leaders do you know that are that humble? And so I
Especially
think,
now.
yeah, exactly. That's so true. And so I think you find people don't want to work for some obnoxious, arrogant boss. Who does?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
somebody that's humble, is willing to share credit, is willing to honor them, almost treasure them in a sense, respect them, listen to them. Those are the
Mhm.
kind of people you want to work for. And ironically, I think if you're true to who you are, I believe, and this is idealistic, but I think the data proves this out, you'll actually be more successful. So
Mhm.
trying to follow some, cut out copy of who you think an executive should be in the business world, that's not just not the way to rise up the ranks, but I don't think you will. There's a better way to be financially successful. Be the boss
Mhm.
you'd want to work for, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
chances are the best and the brightest,
Mhm.
um, they can go other places in a heartbeat. They
Mhm.
have a lot
Mhm.
of options, but they'll stay if they feel like you will honor and respect them, promote them, give them credit. Everybody wants to work for a boss like that. So,
Mhm.
be that boss. So
Mhm.
that's where I think, living your values isn't in conflict with financial success. It actually might increase your
Mhm.
potential. I mean, over the long run. So yeah, I don't think values and being who you are necessarily is a career killer.
Mhm.
I mean, it depends on where you want to work, but work for the right place. That's another
Exactly.
thing is, work for a place that's in line with what you believe. Don't compromise who you are and your values,
Mhm.
because there
Mhm.
are some of the best companies in the world, whether it's, you could pick over the years, Disney or Southwest Airlines in the US. You've got companies that people love to work for because
Mhm.
they really treat their people well. And they're like Southwest Airlines has been incredibly successful. And they're a tough company to compete with because when you have a bunch of people that love to work there, and
Mhm.
culture is a difficult thing to create and an incredibly difficult thing to copy.
Mhm.
So you
Mhm.
have a lot
Mhm.
of uh, business security if you have a good culture.
Mhm. Fantastic. So we're gonna have a break, and for those who are joining us at this point, my guest today is Warwick Fairfax, and we're talking about leadership in general, but we're building on his story of of triumph to help us to understand how we can use our our obstacle and challenges to find our purpose and thrive in life and engineer greatness, because that's my favorite subject. So don't go anywhere. We're just gonna have a short break, and we will be back soon. So we are back. We are back with Warwick. And Warwick, well, just wanted to ask you now, I mean, with this story that you have, you started Credible Leadership. So what is Credible Leadership? And how do you help people through this venture?
Yeah. So Crucible Leadership, it's obviously anchored by my story of failure, if you will, but it's really about helping people bounce back from failures and setbacks.
Mm-hmm,
And so and really the objective at Crucible Leadership is what we call living lives of significance, which means a life on purpose dedicated to serving others.
mm-hmm,
And it's funny, that sounds like a noble ideal, but most of the people we've spoken with, and we have our own podcast, Beyond the Crucible, there's sort of an internal desire, I think, to contribute to the world. So, you often hear this paradigm that when you're on your deathbed and you're thinking about your legacy,
Mm-hmm.
very few people will say, you know what, I'm proud of the fact that I created a multi-billion-dollar company. And really,
Mm-hmm.
that was what my life was about. Even those that have,
Exactly.
they'll be thinking about, well, I'm thinking of my kids and my grandkids and my wife and my husband. I'm thinking about the people I've helped. So most people frame legacy that way. So live your life in a way that on your deathbed, you feel like not only will you be proud, but your kids and your grandkids and your great grandkids and your cousins, your family, your friends, that they'll be proud of. I mean, who doesn't want to leave a life where they
Mm-hmm.
feel like people respect them and are proud of what they did? And you feel like you lived a life well lived. So in true business planning, work your way back and say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what is that legacy I want to leave? What is that life I want to leave? And so for me in Crucible Leadership, the reason we talk about crucibles, and I think as we define them, they're typically very painful, transforming moments. They could
Mm-hmm.
be the death of a loved one. It could be the loss of a business. We've had people on our podcast, like U.S. Navy SEALs who was
Mm-hmm.
paralyzed in a training accident. We've had victims of abuse. We've had people who've lost husbands, wives. I mean, all sorts of different tragedies from the personal to the business. And typically what these people who've all bounced back, otherwise we wouldn't have them, we want to hear the bounce back story too,
Mm-hmm.
is if it's a failure, they'll learn about themselves, some mistakes, what are the things I can learn better? If it's about a setback in general, it can be, well, how can I use this pain that I went through to help other people? In the case of the Navy SEAL that we interviewed, his lifelong dream was to be a Navy SEAL, and being paralyzed, he wasn't able to. So he opened up this, I guess, took charge of this clinic in Southern California, where they have some of the latest equipment to help vets get as much mobility as possible, using the latest technology, engineering possible. So he's using his pain, obviously, for a real purpose to help others, and it doesn't solve the physical, but it does spiritually and emotionally. It gives his life purpose. So it's really, how do you bounce back from crucibles, life-altering setbacks,
Mm-hmm.
to use that pain for a purpose, to live a life of significance? And what we really tell and teach people through blogs, social media, and so forth, is it starts with being who you design to be, which we talked a bit about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Be in line with that. And then think of maybe out of that crucible, maybe there's some pain in which you want to really help others, maybe avoid it, maybe whether it's survivors of abuse or whatever it is. Use that pain to help others. And it's a good vision if it's something that's based on how you're wired, and it's something that you're off the charts passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly in the world of business, whether it's the economy, the markets, there's a lot of things that's going to want to take you down. But if you passionately believe in your vision, you will have more chance of surviving. And not only that, you will get fellow travelers. You will get people that believe in the vision too. You'll have teammates and supporters, and they will join you in what you think is a cause, a sacred cause, if you will, even if it's a business. So that sense of significance, legacy, knowing how you're wired, feeling like your vision, is, to me, it's got to be more than just money. Most of a lot of the successful companies, back to Southwest Airlines, the original vision of that airline was to make travel affordable so the families could spend more time together. That was the original vision of Southwest Airlines. Well, who back when they started, airline travel in the U.S., for instance, was extremely expensive. So their employees, they believe in that vision, making travel affordable to unite friends and family. So, yeah, I mean, those are really some of the keys to Crucible Leadership. We're all about helping people live lives of significance, which to me is a way of living a joyful life where you're just excited to come to work every day. Because it's like, this isn't just about me. In some ways, it sounds very idealistic. In some ways, you feel like you're making the world a better place. Can you imagine if we had thousands of people all over the globe wanting to see their life as using their talents to help others, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you can potentially live a good life while you're doing it. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
guarantee, but that's really what Crucible Leadership is about.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And it's important to, to get this message through, that so that people understand that they have a, they have a role to play to help others, not only to help themselves. It starts with them, but they have value. They can bring value, and in a way, we all connected. It's not just about us. It's really about,
right.
the humanity and the community, because if, humanity is doing well, we are doing well. So, and that's sometimes the message that gets, lost in all the noise that we have now, and everything, the superficial, world sometimes that we live in. And it's sometimes very difficult for a lot of people, because we just realize that, when we know who we are, and we're not afraid, of being who we are, we we accomplished incredible things, and that's key.
It's
So
yeah. I was
go
just going to
ahead.
say. I mean,
Mhm.
I think we have to understand how we're wired, and I believe obviously there's a grand designer from my faith perspective, and I think we're
Mhm.
wired to do good works. We're actually wired to help others
Mhm.
because 99% of sane individuals, when you ask them whether they're in elementary school, university, after, tell me about the times you felt really good about yourself.
Mhm.
At a deep level, often they'll say, well, yeah, I helped my friend at school, or I helped a neighbor, or I was working in this company and we had a charity arm that helped homeless people in the inner city, or whatever it was. It makes you feel good about yourself. We're wired to help others. So
Mhm.
if you want joy in your life, who doesn't want joy?
Mhm.
Everybody wants joy. Everybody wants a joyful life. Well, helping others, we're just designed that way.
Mhm.
We're wired that way. So why not do something that helps others and it's going to make you feel good too?
Mhm.
Just serving yourself, making money, millions or billions, it's empty. There's so many sad stories of people who are incredibly wealthy, and I'm
Mhm.
not against success. I mean,
Mhm.
we live a good life. I'm very blessed despite some of my setbacks. I mean, I certainly have no complaints, but you read about people with, might have a house in the south of France and another one in the Alps, and, all over the place. And they jet from place to place,
Mhm.
party to party. Nothing wrong with that. But you look at them and how happy are they? Are they really happy? Are they joyful? And oftentimes it's like, you can live in a gilded cage, if you will. You have all this
Mhm.
money, but you can be miserable.
Mhm.
So you don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
It's like the whole anthill thing, like the ants are climbing all over each other, get to the top of as they're climbing to the top of the anthill. This is sort of the
Mhm.
parable, if you will. They'll ask the other ants, well, why are we all clambering up? I don't know.
Mhm.
It must be good because everybody else is climbing up. So let's just follow them.
Exactly.
You get to
You
the
know,
top of the anthill
and
and
then
there's nothing.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like,
And I think you're right, because when we talk about success, we look at other people, but it's not our success. We have to define what success is for us. For one person, it might be being a multimillionaire or billionaire, but it doesn't mean that it's the same for us. So, and it doesn't mean that that's success, because success is really personal. And I think sometimes we miss that. We miss the fact that, we have to define our own success. And that's on that, when we have this definition, that we're going to rate ourselves. And that's the only way we can be happy, because if we want to be to have the success of somebody else, then it becomes really difficult, and we're never happy because we're trying to catch up all the time.
well,
And
that's the other thing. It's funny,
mhm,
in sports, you hear this whole phrase of being the greatest of all time.
mhm,
Well, if you define success that way in business, for instance, there'll always be somebody else who's better, who meets
mhm.
your mark. Like, I'm a big tennis fan, and so right
So
now, in
am
terms of
I.
major titles, Roger Federer is
Mhm,
the greatest of all time. But you've got Rafa Nadal and Novak Djokovic close on his
Agree.
heels, and they may well eclipse him. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
a Federer fan, so that would be a shame. But I obviously respect the others.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have your sense of ego wound up in terms of being the greatest of all time, that's a dangerous position, because you
Mm-hmm.
will almost certainly fail. But
Mm-hmm.
there'll be somebody else who will do better and bigger. It's funny. I heard one person share this story. This is going to sound a bit weird, but I'm not into heavy metal music. But there was this original. I think it was Metallica with some heavy
Mm-hmm.
metal group, and they were super successful. And somebody got kicked out or left and
Mm-hmm.
formed Megadeth, some other massive heavy metal thing. And they were incredibly successful, but because the guy couldn't quite achieve the success of Metallica, he was close but not quite. He felt like his life was a failure. He was all about beating the group that booted him out. Well,
Mm-hmm.
how stupid. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
forgetting his values, he was very successful, but just because he didn't beat the people he wanted to beat, he felt miserable. He felt like his
Mm-hmm.
life was not worthwhile. I mean, you just don't want to be that person. Don't measure your
No.
success based on somebody else or on
Mm-hmm.
some
Mm-hmm.
arbitrary financial goal, because somebody else is going to beat that at some point,
Mm-hmm.
almost inevitably.
And that's the thing, is that with everything that's happening, there's always somebody better. There's always somebody better. So you can't really really start to think that I'm the best and that's all I want to be. You just have to be the best version of yourself. That's all. And that's you have to
Exactly.
define what is the best version of yourself, and keep being better every single day. Do better things, and reach out to people. And my favorite is engineer greatness wherever you are and wherever it matters, because that's really key. And you
Absolutely.
don't have to
I, I
compare
think,
yourself.
I mean, to use what you just said, I think to
Mm-hmm.
me, a big part of engineering greatness is being the best version of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
a huge, part of it. And I think, what does it mean to be the best version of yourself? I'd say honor your underlying values and beliefs, be who you were designed to be, do something that serves others.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is a value judgment, but it's my belief that we're wired in a certain way that we're happiest and most joyful when in some fashion we're serving others.
Mm-hmm.
So, you might say, well, that's not me. And maybe that's true. I just feel like humanity is designed a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that we're happiest when whatever we're doing, somehow it's helping and serving others. Others may not agree, and that's fine. It's just my perspective on how humans are created.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the thing is, you've seen it, yourself.
Mhm,
You learn it the hard way by
mhm,
coming from a very wealthy family, and then having everything designed for you,
mhm.
and then no, that was not it. It was not for you. You had to redesign your life, and create your own path, and create and still becoming the best version of yourself, which is in a way a testimony. It's not something that was made up.
And,
And
it,
that's
it takes real courage to be the best
mhm,
version of yourself, because
mhm,
I grew up, my mother was an incredible person. She could throw parties for 300 like it was nothing. She was highly intelligent, very
mhm,
outgoing, contributed a lot to Australian opera auditions to help some young opera singers go to the best opera houses in the
mhm,
world, Bayreuth in Germany, Milan. So amazing person. We had these incredible parties, but you'd have ambassadors, people from Hollywood, prime ministers, all sorts of people. And a lot of them were incredible people, but it's like when you're in that kind of milieu, in that kind of world, um, authenticity you don't often find, because they're not bad people, but there's incredible pressure to be a certain way, look
mhm,
wonderful, dress incredibly, and just you want to seem successful, and you don't say, yeah, things aren't going that well, and
mhm, mhm, mhm,
you don't do that. And so I think, I feel sad for people in that environment, but you want to be you want to be authentic. Be who you are. Don't try to be who others want you to be. Just, one of the things I think people do so little in the business world is something I think of as be vulnerable for a purpose. It's okay to say, you know what? I don't have all the answers. I've made a lot of mistakes, and here's some mistakes I've made. And when people feel like, you mean it's okay to fail, it's okay to make mistakes, you want to learn from them, it helps them not just be vulnerable, but also helps them take risks. Because it's
Exactly.
like, if you're not willing to take a risk, you'll never fail, but you'll never succeed. So this sense of authenticity, vulnerability, especially, I was chatting to somebody that works a lot with millennials. Millennials who are sort of 20 somethings, early 30s, they crave authenticity, vulnerability. They loathe people who just put on a pretend face. They hate that. And so, you want to hide the best and the brightest in the young folks. Be authentic. Be vulnerable for a purpose. You don't have to share every stupid thing you've ever done, but just sharing stories where there's a reason, there's a parable, there's a reason you're sharing them to teach a lesson. I think often in kind of ancient wisdom literature, the way lessons were taught was typically by parables, by story, whether it's Greek mythology or I'm sure in many different cultures around the world, there's all these ancient stories. Well, the stories of a parable, whether it's Aesop's fables. So, being vulnerable and sharing some of these stories, it can be like sharing your own personal parables and fables, if you will, to help people. So that, as you're successful, it erodes your desire to be vulnerable and authentic, but you just gotta not let it go. Don't try to be, some carbon copy of what you view as a successful person, because, people hate that. They hate the plastic pretend faces and the plastic smiles, and people don't like that.
And the thing is, sometimes we don't realize these people that we want to emulate, they are actually wearing masks.
Right.
So it's very difficult. They are wearing the mask, and you want to emulate them, but then it's not authentic. So it becomes really you go really right into chaos, if I can express myself like that.
Well,
Because
right. It's like, politicians, with the plastic smile, and they, hug the babies and shake the hand, and they'll ask you a couple questions and they'll smile, but they could care less about you. It's all about just getting your vote, and then after election time, they disappeared. You never see them, and it's you just don't want to be that kind of person. The perfect hair, the perfect smile. It's just, don't be that person.
Yeah. So we're gonna have another last break, and then we'll come back for the last bit of the show. It's been an incredible discussion and very deep, actually, and I really, really love it. So another break, and we'll be back for the last part of the show. So we are back with Warwick for the last part of the show. And there's a question that I love asking to, my guest is, you already alluded to it, is, what is the legacy that you want to leave? I mean, you've had an incredible journey. You've all the ups and downs that you could, think about, got back, and really, living your dream, I think now. And but what is it for the future for you, and the legacy that you want to leave?
Well, that's a great question. So, for me, again, it's not so much about fame or success. I want my wife, my kids to be proud of me. It's funny when I think of John Fairfax, the founder of Fairfax Media. He was a person of great faith. He was an elder at his church. His kids loved him. His wife loved him. His employees loved him. So I don't have any desire to emulate him in his media operation, but certainly to be that kind of person where you're a good husband, wife, father, mother, friends respect you, who you work with respect who you are as a person. That's certainly important. I think just try to use my gifts and how I'm wired to help others. Certainly from my faith perspective, we're all given a certain calling. Be true to the calling that I feel like, from my faith perspective, God has put on my heart. And certainly what I'm doing now, with Crucible Leadership and helping people bounce back from failure and seeing pain in the purpose and helping others. I think that's an important part of the legacy. As I tell my kids, even the work I've done on church board, school board, those are organizations I believe in passionately, and they're doing good works. They're places of grace, not judgment. I feel like I've been able to contribute in different areas, whether it's strategic planning, governance, different things. So, all of those areas, I'd like to be thought of as somebody that, obviously a person of faith, that respected people, very high value of mine. It's really, when I think of legacy, it's your character. And so that's important to me, is, am I living what I believe? Am I respected for being that person, of being in line, living in light of my beliefs, and values of integrity and humility, vulnerability. So, I don't know if that answered the question, but it's sort of a combination of things. It's really less about what Crucible Leadership achieves or success. I don't really care about that so much. It's more about the journey and living in light of my values and faith, and try to be true to the calling that I feel like, from my perspective, God has put on my life. So that'd be, I think, kind of the answer.
Yeah, and I think you alluded to it already when we talked about you started to talk about the legacy, how you started Crucible Leadership. And I mean, it's just amazing, because a lot of people suffer in silence. And I think it's a big legacy to open up, and use your experience to help them, to guide them. Because sometimes we don't know when things happen to us. We just lost. We don't know. People become very fearful. Some of them become ill. I mean, mental health is on the rise, because they think that, as soon as there's a failure or they've lost something, they stay focused on what they've lost, and they deteriorate. And it's important that they understand it's not the end of the world. You can actually use what you're going through to go to the next level of your greatness, because that's what it's all about. It's
Well,
you're not there yet. So
exactly. And that's one of the things we talk about, is sometimes in your darkest moment, you have a choice. In some setbacks, physical setbacks, there may be limited things you can do physically, but I think we always have choices emotionally and spiritually. You can hide under the covers and say, I failed, I'm worthless, or what that person did to me is unforgivable, and it was awful, and I'm worthless, and I'm just going to hide under the covers and check out on life. I'm going to sit here for the next 30, 40, 50 years until I pass. And that's it. I'm giving up. And that may be understandable, but I think we have a choice. Are we going to sit there, or are we going to say, this was awful, it was unfair, but I'm not going to let that, we're not defined by our worst day. That doesn't define us. How am I going to bounce back? And often it enlists other people that want to, help you if you let them. Being vulnerable, using pain for a purpose is one of these interesting things. Is I've found in my own life, and pretty much everybody I've talked to who's bounced back from crucibles, as they use, their pain and their story to help others, it actually lessens the pain of the crucible itself. It doesn't go away. There's always a scar. But I can say in my case, it has got easy to talk about my sort of massive failure and dumb mistakes and stupid assumptions. There's not like no pain, but it's vastly, vastly easier than it used to be. So we do have choices. We can bounce back. And, it does, there's a healing balm, a healing component when you're using your pain to help others. So really, it does come back to choice, and it's not an easy choice, and it's not like a light bulb. For me, it took most of the '90s. It can take decades to bounce back, but but it is possible. It is possible in the darkest of times to think, there can be a way forward. There can be a way back. There is hope.
Thank you so much, Warwick, for this deep and a very interesting conversation. And I think it's actually on time, because with everything that people are going through right now, with the pandemic, and then people losing jobs, losing businesses, and losing families and family members, it's a good message for them to understand that they can use their pain for a purpose, and they are not alone. People like you and other people have been through that, and it might take some time, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and they really have to look at it as a gift that's coming to them, to go to the next level of their greatness. And that's what this platform is trying to do, is that whatever bring this inspiration to people who are struggling, or people who are asking themselves how they can still move forward. And I hope that they got the answer today, because it was really, really a very good and deep conversation. And thanks for being vulnerable, because that's really a very beautiful story that we have. So how do people get in contact with you, or try to learn a little bit more about what you do with Crucible Leadership? How can they do that?
Yeah, people can go to crucibleleadership.com. I publish a blog. I'm active on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. I have a podcast, Beyond the Crucible, which is available on most podcast platforms, where we interview people with crucibles and learn how they bounce back, as well as people who offer perspectives on different aspects related to crucible leadership. I have a book coming out next year on crucible leadership that talks about my story and some of the principles we've discussed. So yeah, those are some of the ways. And yeah, I mean, you'll hear lots of stories that will give hope. Certainly on the podcast, of every imaginable crucible you can think of, with diverse people of all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of experiences. That's the thing that really is great. It's not just one. It's not just one story. I think we can all bounce back. So we can all live a life of significance, a life on purpose, dedicated to serving others. We all have that capability, to be it a large organization or just a small community effort in your neighborhood. It's greatness is irrespective of size. It's just the depth of your passion and belief in it. That's you don't have to lead some large organization to be great.
You can, and it's important that people understand that wherever they are, they have the power. So they to just step into their power and really go for this greatness, which is they have it already in a way, and it's just a matter of enriching it, and keep going, and understand that those failures are just opportunity in disguise, and really use them to go, like I said, to the next level of their greatness. So that's it for today. Just a few announcements. So tomorrow there's the Female Wave of Change conference starting. So it's tomorrow afternoon, European time. So a great group of women who are actually trying to reshape, the future, and get back to the basic of humanity, especially right now with what's going on. So don't there's still the opportunity to register, and participate. So that's all for today, and we had a fantastic hour of engineering and of greatness with you, Warwick. And before we leave, just if you want to leave the audience with the last, your last thought, your last word before we end the show.
I think when you go through a crucible, your worst day doesn't have to define you. It can be the key to an exciting life where you can live a life of significance, a joy-filled life. You may not feel it right now, but you have a choice to bounce back and live the life that you were designed for, live the life that will make you joyful and indeed will make others joyful, a life of significance dedicated to serving others. So it is possible. I think it's possible for everybody.
Mm-hmm. So it is possible. You've heard it from Warwick. And what I'm going to ask you, please share this message and make sure you get familiar with Crucible Leadership. Go on the website, and there's also, subscribe to Beyond the Crucible podcast. There are incredible stories that are shared and that you can build on, and learn from, so that you can it can help you to start to think, how powerful, and understand and realize how powerful you are, and start to use this power to become the best version of yourself. So thank you so much for anybody who's watching, and the people who are going to watch, and I thank you a lot today for all the insight, inspiration, and the wisdom, Warwick, today. So take care, and have a great weekend. And may God bless you, and may God bless everybody that's been able to watch today. Thank
Thank-
you. Bye.
Thanks, Maria.